Perfect. So thank you so much for joining us today. If we haven't met before, my name is Mandy Fair, and I'm the coordinator for undergraduate research, scholarly, and artistic work. And part of my role is acting as the liaison officer for our tri-agency USRAs this year and working to coordinate the process. And I'm really delighted that Julia has joined me today as a faculty member with experience with the USRA program, and also someone who was generous enough to be part of a small working group to give some guidance on our process this year. Also, thank you for joining us, Wendy, who is also part of our working group. I don't know, Julia, do you want to say anything else to introduce yourself before we get started?
Yeah, thanks, Mandy. So for people who don't know me, I'm Julia Boughner. I'm in the Department of Anatomy, Physiology, and Pharmacology. And so I've held at least one USRA student almost every summer for almost every year that I've had my faculty position. So it's been about 13 years worth of USRAs. And I've also served on um, various other review bodies for NSERC. So I have a little bit more of a, I guess, holistic perspective to how NSERC thinks and what they're looking for in successful applications. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm really happy for the invitation. So thanks.
Excellent. And just seeing some of the questions in the chat. So our plan for today is I am going to attempt to share my screen, and then we'll still, even though it's been years, ask you if you can see it. And I'll quickly walk through the numbers of awards we have for this year, as well as the changes to the application process. And then after sort of going through that, please type questions in the chat throughout. I have some questions for Julia, more around the mentoring component and the how she was in the past worked with students and some of her guidance for how to do that in a way to really help students through our process. And then we should have lots of time for questions at the end. All righty. So you can see my screen. Excellent. So before I dig into the changes, I do want to make sure to acknowledge that we're on Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis, and to pay our respects to the First Nations and Métis ancestors of this place and reaffirm our relationship with one another. Joining over Zoom, if you're joining from a different Indigenous territory, I encourage you to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of the land where you are on today. I like to think about in terms of undergraduate research and the work I do at the university, how we can apply reconciliation to our research, scholarly, and artistic work. So for me, this means being willing to learn, but also often relearn, and trying to be sure to promote work that is led by Indigenous peoples and communities, and thinking about how the work we do, no matter what the discipline is, how it can benefit and be accessible to Indigenous communities. And there's a really exciting opportunity with NSERC this year where we can put forward an unlimited number of Indigenous student researchers for NSERC USRAs. So I'd like to invite and encourage everyone on the call to think about, are there students that you could encourage to apply for these awards? So for our summer 2024, we have our quotas from NSERC. Once again, USask has 60 NSERC USRAs for our entire university. But we can, in addition to those 60 awards, put forward an unlimited number of Indigenous students and Black student researchers for NSERCs. And I have confirmed with NSERC that as long as the students meet the eligibility criteria, they will receive awards. NSERC will only deny awards if they don't meet NSERC's eligibility criteria. Additionally, we have one SSHRC and one CIHR for the entire university. Only Black student researchers are able to apply for these awards. And so if you know of students that might be interested, it would be wonderful if you could encourage them. I am struggling a bit to convince students to apply for the awards that aren't guaranteed, when if they can pivot their project to the natural sciences or engineering, if they meet the eligibility criteria, they are guaranteed an award. So this is all from NSERC, but I think it is helpful just to quickly go over the student award eligibility. This is on our website. It's also on NSERC's website. The pieces I'm going to highlight is that international students are not eligible for this award program. So that may be something I'm working to communicate that to students, but as students approach you to make sure that they are either Canadian citizens, permanent residents, or have protected status. It gets a bit confusing in terms of the eligibility to apply for the award versus holding the award. Students do have to be registered in a bachelor's degree program at our application deadline. So that's the date we've set for January 31st, 2024. They are able to still hold the award if they finish their degree and convocate in the spring. In terms of grade criteria, students have to have at least a B- or a 70. With the competitive awards where we only have 60 NSERC USRAs, typically in the past, students have higher averages. But in the cases where we have unlimited awards, the requirement is a 70. And NSERC has also made it very clear that they don't want us to deny students awards because of grades. So we have some flexibility where if students show improvement or there's other signs of academic excellence, that we can still potentially put students forward for these awards if they don't have a cumulative average of 70 or above. For the NSERC USRAs, students cannot be enrolled in an undergraduate professional degree program in the health sciences. Where it gets confusing is with our one CIHR USRA, students in a professional degree program in the health sciences are still able to apply. And some clarity on this next one. So students can't have at any time have been registered in a graduate program in the same field of study. I've double checked with NSERC what they mean by that. And they mean, so if you're applying for an NSERC, the student cannot have started graduate studies in any natural sciences or engineering. Same for the SSHRC or the CIHR. In contrast, a student could have started graduate work, say in history, and then still apply for an NSERC USRA in the sciences or engineering. So it's sort of those broad, very broad fields that NSERC is using for that definition. We only offer awards once a year, so it's not typically an issue for our students, but students can only hold one NSERC USRA per fiscal year. Students don't have to be U of S students to apply for our awards, and they could apply for USRAs with other institutions, so that's more where that could be an issue. And students can only hold 3 NSERC USRAs in their entire undergraduate career. Finally, if a student already has a bachelor's degree and they're currently studying towards a second or a third bachelor's degree, they can still apply for these awards as long as they meet the other eligibility criteria. So to hold the award, a student has to have completed their entire first year or 2 semesters of university. Where that can become an issue is first-year students can apply for the award, but if, let's say, they don't finish that second term, they wouldn't be eligible to hold the award. Confirming again, if a student is going to finish their degree next term, they can still hold the award as long as they're registered in January. And then the other criteria is really making sure that the focus of their summer work is on research and development activities. That is meant to be full-time research, 37.5 hours a week for 14 to 16 weeks. Students are allowed to take a maximum of 2 courses during their award if they have made special arrangements with you, their research supervisor. And then finally, our criteria around the awards for Black student researchers, noting that the CIHR and the SSHRC are exclusively for Black student researchers. Similarly, to apply for an NSERC USRA for Black student researchers, students must self-identify as Black. And students applying for these awards have to consent to self-identifying as Black not only with us, but with NSERC and if awarded publicly. For the NSERC USRAs for Indigenous student researchers, our new Debwewin Indigenous Truth Policy will apply. So a condition of receiving the award is that students' Indigenous identity will have to be verified. We have links on our website for where students can go if they haven't already submitted documentation to that policy. I should also clarify that for these awards, NSERC defines Indigenous as First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples of Canada. So some of this information is similar to previous years and some is new. We've updated our website, so you should be able to, if you're sort of clicking along, and I'll pop some links into the chat for you. We have a new section that's just called Info for Faculty and Departments. We wanted to make it easy for you to find the information that you need to find. So I'll see. I copied my links. Looks like it's working. I've got it in the chat. So for supervisors, this is a continuation from previous years. Supervisors must be eligible to hold the same tri-agency funding as the award that they are applying for with a student. So for most of our awards, that's NSERC, but for the SSHRC or the CIHR award, the supervisor would have to be eligible to hold that funding. Supervisors do not have to currently hold tri-agency funding. They just have to be eligible to hold tri-agency funding. One of our internal rules that we've had in the past, but trying to communicate it just a bit more clearly, faculty may act as a supervisor to no more than 3 applications for NSERC USRAs. Faculty may act as a supervisor for additional USRAs for the NSERC USRA for Indigenous student researchers and the NSERC USRA for Black student researchers. As I'm sure most folks in this group know, NSERC provides $6,000 towards the student's salary for the summer. We are paying these as jobs with a salary and with benefits. So the faculty contribution, it really depends on the rate of pay that you select for your student. That ranges from $14 to $16.96 an hour, and how long the research project will be. And NSERC requires it be a minimum of 14 weeks, but it can be up to 16 weeks. So depending on those factors, the faculty contribution is going to range from sort of $2,410.68, sort of if you're paying $14 an hour to 14 weeks. The highest faculty contribution would be $5,644.50 for a 16 weeks at our top wage. We have a calculator on the website. If you want to sort of play with the numbers, there's different ways you can put in how much money you have to figure out what that student wage should be. You can also sort of, if you want to pay a student sort of a certain wage, see what your contribution would need to be. The other big change we have for this year, and this is the result of a lot of discussion with our working group, is asking departments to submit a list of ranked student applicants in terms of academic performance. This is just required for the competitive USRAs. And the goal of this is to give our adjudicators additional information to help us assess that academic performance and to better account for differences between departments and to provide an opportunity for departments to sort of have a say in the process. And I'll provide a bit more detail later on about how we'll be evaluating the student applicants and what the adjudicators will be looking for. So our changes for 2024, and that was sort of a big change for departments on that last slide. the big changes are really in how the applications are submitted internally to USask. And the goal of the changes is to streamline the process for students, hopefully to make it easier for yourselves as faculty, and to make it so the students can receive a bit more support from my office. So rather than having students navigate the NSERC portal, we're having students submit their application through Canvas. Ideally, I think most students should be fairly familiar with Canvas, so it should be a platform that is easier for them to use. Successful applicants will still be required to submit their application to the NSERC portal, but then I can set up workshops and work with them and provide a bit more support to help them get their online accounts created and to get the documents submitted to that portal. So hopefully that'll make it easier on you as a supervisor. We're also not requiring students to pay for and submit official USAS transcripts. I'm just going to pull them from awards. Students do still have to provide official transcripts if they have attended other universities. So that's a potential point where students may need some guidance and clarification from faculty supervisors. We've also changed the student application form. So last year, students had to submit their form through NSERC, and then they had to separately email a statement of interest. Because everything is being submitted through Canvas, I've been able to combine that into one student application form just to make it easier for them. We've also, based on feedback from the working group, instead of just having sort of, you have to have the student write one page statement of interest, we've broken that down into 3 required and 1 optional questions for the student to give them clear prompts and guidance about the type of information our adjudicators will be looking for. Finally, the evaluation of how the different application components are weighted is exactly the same as last year. But what we've done is built out a more detailed rubric, hopefully to make it easier for yourselves as faculty and for your students to know what the adjudicators are looking for. And I will just pop some links. I have links to all of the forms. And to the rubric as well. Just pop those into the chat. There we go. So this is what it looks like in Canvas. If students go to our webpage, we have a section basically that says apply, and then the student clicks on the award they want to apply for, if that's the regular NSERC USRA, or if, for instance, they wanted to apply for an NSERC USRA for Black student researchers, they click on the award they want to apply for, and we have a button link that they can click on where they can sign themselves up for that Canvas site. And then once they're in the Canvas site, this is the one for our regular NSERC USRA application. This is what they'll see, so they can confirm they've signed up for the right award. In the Canvas site, all of the forms in the rubric are also available just to make it easier for students to find them. And then students will submit their application as an assignment by 11:59 p.m. on January 31st, 2024. And just so you can see when they go to the assignment, this is what they see. They have their instructions of what they need to submit. We are asking them to submit both the student application form and the faculty application form. And if they have transcripts from other universities, in one submission, but we've provided instructions and a link to a video for the students if they don't know how to attach multiple files to a submission. They can also see the detailed rubric. You as faculty are welcome to, if you want to just sign up for the Canvas course and see what it includes. I will likely be kicking people out of it when it comes time to evaluate, just so that we don't have too many people in there. But you're welcome to sign yourself up if it's helpful to see what your students are seeing in their course. So just again, with our application forms, this year's student application form, it basically combines all the information we need on that original NSERC Form 202 Part 1 with last year's statement of interest. Because it's our own form and because student awards is part of our adjudication, there's space for students to list all of the awards that they've won. They're not limited to 4. And it would be great if you could encourage them to list any award. In talking to students, my sense is some of them think they only need to list their most impressive awards, or that if an award came from USAS, they don't need to tell us. So making sure they know that that is where you document everything. And then again, that statement of interest is now 3 questions and an optional 4th. Your faculty application form is really me copying and pasting the questions from NSERC Form 202 into a Word document and changing the colors to USAS green. It has the same constraints in terms of character limits or line limits. So if your student is successful, you should just be able to copy and paste everything from this form into the NSERC portal. And so those 3 questions, just so you can see them. Oh, Julia, your hand is up. Did you want to add something? Please jump
Yeah, I
in.
just did, just when you had, perfect, thank you so much. So that slide, I found from working in Word documents that I can have exactly within the character number that I'm told I need. But there's something, unless it's magically better this year, in the research portal, in the field, sometimes the spacing is such that even though it should fit, it doesn't fit. So I would always have a leeway of like 10 or 20 characters between a Word document and the online form. So just something for everyone to bear in mind when they actually are porting their text into that research portal form, if that
Oh,
is
that
next.
is fantastic to know, because I have never had to submit the actual NSERC form. And I think too, because everyone going into NSERC, we've already said we're putting forward. So if you need to end up deleting a sentence from part of your application to make it fit, I think that would be okay too.
Okay, that will be great to put in a sidebar for like
I will
those
put
people who
that.
are selected, just so that no one's like
Yes,
panicking about 5 characters not fitting or a word cutting off
exactly.
and then, yeah. Okay, thanks. I'm gonna mute myself again.
No, that is a great point. And that's why it's so good to have faculty be part of this discussion, because I love processes, but I haven't actually had to submit to this portal as a faculty member. So that's super helpful. And please, anyone else too, I know some folks on our call have a lot of experience with NSERC too. So if you have other, experiences or tips or tricks, please pop them into the chat because it's helpful for me as well. So our updated student questions, really the 3 questions are what they will be evaluated on as how we evaluate their research potential. For the first question, it's about what experiences or skills they currently have that would support them to complete their summer research project. A strong answer will have specific examples and very clearly connect to their research project. I'm hosting sessions in early January for students, and I have slides at the end to help them to identify their skill sets that will hopefully assist them with this application, but also other applications or jobs that they're applying for. Our second question asks them how their summer research project will help them to develop or practice research skills and other competencies. So wanting to understand how this is going to grow their skills from previous research experiences or other experiences, and trying with these questions to make it so if this is a student's first time working as a student assistant in a lab, it's their first NSERC USRA, that they can answer these questions fully and receive full marks. And that a student who this is maybe their third NSERC USRA can answer them fully and receive full marks. Our third question is, why do they want to complete their research project and how will it contribute to their future education or career? And you'll see in our rubric, we're very clear in saying we're not looking for them to say, I want to go to grad school and that gets full marks. It's okay if they don't know what their future career is, but we want them to be showing thoughtfulness and some specificity of sort of the big picture of why this experience is sort of contributing to their education or to what they think their career goals might be, even if it's just to help them determine if they like something. And then our fourth question is optional. I would say, though, if you have students that are applying for an NSERC USRA for Black student researchers or for Indigenous student researchers, and they don't quite have that 70 GPA, I would say they need to fill out this fourth question. This is where the students have the opportunity to let us know if there's anything the educator should know to help them understand their academic performance. So this could be students explaining lower grades by talking about challenges. It could be students showcasing improvement. But it can also be a space where a student could say, hey, I've maintained an excellent average, and I also do all of these other extracurriculars and volunteering and work responsibilities to just sort of show the adjudicators how impressive their academic performance is. Again, if students do have grades that are very close to the 70 mark, this question does become more important, but it can also be a great way for a student with an average in the high 80s or even 90s to help the adjudicators understand their story. So just a quick summary of our adjudication and rubric process, and you can look at the more detailed rubric for specific description. Academic potential is worth 30%. This is a change from last year where we really spent a lot of time thinking, what can we provide our adjudicators so they can assess academic potential? And it's not just a situation where the student with like the 98, which I didn't even know was possible, gets full marks, and the student with the 87 is oddly penalized. So we want to have space to look at not just their total grades, but to assess if there's been improvement, to look at other indicators of academic potential like awards, to have that opportunity for departments to rank their students and to give us that extra context of how grading works from their department's perspective, what they consider to be that exceptional performance. As well as taking in the student's personal context or story to help the adjudicator to make sense of those grades. 40% is based on the part of the application that the faculty members submit. So it's about the quality of the research experience and the anticipated mentorship. This is where I would encourage you to think about the fact that these applications will be adjudicated by other faculty members who aren't in the same research area as you. We don't want adjudicators to be evaluating their own departments. So it may need some writing of the student project in a way that's understandable to someone with expertise broadly in the natural sciences or engineering, but who may not have expertise in your discipline. And we really want to understand what the student-specific project will be, looking at the feasibility of the research experience, looking at if there's a clear outline of the student's role, and starting to understand what quality of training or mentorship the student will receive. And I understand with the NSERC form, there's very limited space to answer these questions. So we've really tried to highlight in the rubric what we're looking for, what level of specificity we're looking for. And I think adjudicators, because they'll be able to look at the student's application as well, making sure that things are matching, right? So if the skills that the student's expected to be practicing don't fit with the level of experience that the student has, that can be something that we're assessing as well. And then finally, student research potential, 30%. Each of those three required questions is worth 10% each. And again, I think we're going to chat with Julia about how to mentor students to complete their part of the application. I think for a lot of our students, these are questions that may be new to them. And so I'll be hosting workshops to support them, but I think the strongest applications will get that support from their faculty supervisors as well. And then finally, for our results, so one of the benefits of using Canvas is we're going to be able to let every single student applicant know their results Our goal is to let them know during the February break. They'll find out if they've been successful or if they've been waitlisted, or if they're unsuccessful. Students that are waitlisted will be notified by early March, and so they can know when to expect finding out if they have this summer research opportunity and job. Will be able to release their score, and sort of they'll see how they scored on the rubric to get general feedback. The students who are successful will be required to submit their application again into the NSERC portal, but that's where my office will offer workshops and be able to provide support. And then successful applicants will also be signed up for our student undergraduate research experience newsletters, and we'll be hosting workshops, especially during May and June, as well as our summer symposium. And I'll be sending out a survey to all the faculty supervisors to ask what would be helpful from your perspective for us to offer your students. So I'm already anticipating doing a session on how a research job is different than research in the classroom, just to help build those basic job skills that I know sometimes our students don't have if this is the first time that they have a summer job or that they're working on campus in sort of that job position versus that I'm taking classes. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so we can see each other for our conversation. I don't know, were there any questions, Julia, from the chat that I've missed that we should address, or should we jump into our discussion?
There were some questions. I think I've addressed them reasonably. So, but if someone feels that they would like more information right now, jump in. Otherwise, I think that maybe it's better for you to see them at the end, and you might want to email people to follow up with details.
Perfect.
But Asmahan, I see that you've popped up.
You answered my question, but I want to be absolutely sure.
It's the
Am I
number
allowed
of
to-
awards given. So you
I can
can
apply to 5, for example,
you
but
can have the same student put
Okay.
in 30 applications or whatever,
All
but
right.
it's that student can only receive 3. And right, Mandy, it's one student can hold up to 3, but they
Yes.
can
no, this is
apply
not my
however many times.
question. This is not my
Oh,
question
is
because
it about the faculty supervisor?
yes,
Yes, I would just put in
Oh,
3
got you.
because if you put in more than 1 and 4 win, then we're in a really terrible situation. So we just want supervisors to put forward 3 students for the competitive
3
awards.
applications only.
Yes. But
Okay.
Julie is completely right. Students can apply to other universities too, right? They can apply to our university, they can apply to other universities, but they would have to follow that other university's process, and they're maxed out at 3 for their university career.
Thank you.
We love the number 3. Hey, that's becoming apparent right now.
Thanks
Can
for
I ask you
making sure
something
that you
along
got
those
your
same
question
lines?
and answered, Asmahan. Sorry, Michelle.
I just wanted to follow up with Asman's question. If we have a student that's co-supervised by 2 people, does that count towards our 3? Or how?
So with NSERC, it has to just be one faculty member that's putting the application forward. So it would count towards whichever faculty member is sort of has the name on the application.
Perfect. Thank you.
Can I ask one more question?
Of course.
You have 3 questions. You said for students for the statement of the students, 10 points each, but there's a 4th. How much is it worth
So
if
the
they
4th
decide to?
question is optional, but the part of the application that the 4th question supports is our assessment of academic performance. So if they do answer that 4th question, it gives the adjudicators more information to figure out that 30% of academic performance. So it's technically not required, but I've been encouraging all students to answer that question. Some of the students I've spoken to seem nervous. They were worried that they could somehow lower their score. And I cannot imagine a scenario where answering that question would cause an adjudicator to give them a lower ranking in terms of academic performance. Hi, Catherine. It's great to see you.
Hi, yeah. It's good to hear this information there. I have a quick question about how the student can access the Canvas. Is that the course is already created for all, as long as they get to Canvas, they can see it?
Yes, so the courses are created and the students just have to basically click on a button and they self-enroll themselves in the course. And so if you would like to, you're welcome to self-enroll in one of the courses just to see how it works. But yes, they just have to click and add themselves to the course of their choosing. And if they have any trouble with Canvas, they can email me. I should note, though, if you do have students who are not USASC students applying, they will need to email their application to me. They won't be able to sign up for the Canvas course. That information is on our website for the students that are not currently USASC students.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Perfect. Are you ready for your questions, Julia?
I am, but can I just hop on to
Of
two
course.
things that you mentioned? So you raised really good points about how students who are in medical programs, for example, aren't eligible for NSERC. So that's where I would just want to put a plug in for if there is a student in, let's say, the medical program here, we have the Dean's Summer Research Award program. So that, though, that deadline is different. So that deadline is passed for this year, but for future years. Like, for example, I built a relationship with a student who worked with me several summers, went into medicine, and then wanted to continue. So we applied for a Dean's because he wasn't eligible anymore for his USRA. And then the other thing, too, is that absolutely, as you said, you can't be in a grad program and hold a USRA. But I have had, and other people, of course, have had situations where we construct it so that a student will start a USRA, do that, and then seg into their graduate program.
Exactly.
So yeah, you can kind of
Exactly.
time it like that. So just for people not to be intimidated that they can't have the same student do a USRA and then start a grad program with them.
Exactly. And that's where the NSERC language can be confusing, definitely for students, because they can't have started the graduate program, but they could be registered to start in September. So that's such a fantastic point. And thanks for the information about the Dean's Summer Research Award for students in medicine.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, that was just two things I wanted to raise because you made really good points and I wanted to hop into them.
Perfect. Okay, so I have 3 questions for Julia, but please, this is meant to be helpful for everyone, so feel free to drop your own answers into the chat or your additional questions for her or for I. So my first question is just if you could outline your personal approach to how you've worked with students to apply for these awards.
Yeah, thank you. And this is going to build on really useful information you've already shared, where I assume that students don't know much or anything about what USRAs are, how to do the application process. This is the first year where we have Canvas. So in the past, it would have been directly in Research Portal, and I would never assume any level of competency with that. So, and like you mentioned about the scholarships, I work with my students from the very start through to the very end of the process. So I regard it as an opportunity to get to know them better, for them to build a working relationship with me. And so I like to meet with them as early as we both have time in our schedules. We have a first meeting where we might even walk through, like maybe with Canvas, maybe you want to walk through it with your student. Maybe you just want to, walk through the 2 application forms together and walk through the rubric with them. So I would suggest also share, like be transparent, make sure that they have seen both the supervisor and the student forms, that they've seen the rubric, explain that if you're comfortable. Otherwise, Mandy, I know you're a wonderful resource for students if they have additional questions, as well as for faculty. So it's really, for me, I find my job with them is unpacking everything. And again, that scholarship point is great because even if they know to include it, I think with the online form, there was a limited number of characters. So sometimes some student will have a scholarship that's like a named scholarship. And so then they don't know like what part of those characters to include. It's little things, but it can make a difference when you're only able to see a certain snippet of information. So it's like dealing with students who might be, modest or uncertain, and they may also not appreciate how important the narrative is now with that application, now that there's been a shift away from just considering grades so heavily. So again, I find myself in my role with the students is is unpacking why that question is there. Why is that information field there? And helping them to bring out, the very best points that show them in the very best light. And to that end, I also ask for my students unofficial transcripts as well as their resumes, which probably everyone would have done when they were vetting students anyway. But the reason I find it's useful at this application phase is that I can look through and I can kind of build my own story about their successes and their talents. And if I see that what they're putting on their application form isn't matching up with what I think is the best way to showcase them, then I can help with the writing. So I work with them on the writing as well. So I don't just like send them off and then they come back with a finished product. I make it really clear that we're here to work together if they want that. But I hope they will, right? Because that's also part of that working relationship. And I get to see how they respond to constructive feedback. Does that kind of answer that question? I think I went off on one for a little bit.
I thought it beautifully answered the question. And just such great
Okay.
advice too on, I think, and I don't want this to sound as a stereotype, but sometimes, especially for science or engineering students, the writing component of you need to fill out this, like last year, a blank page, or even this year, you need to, write like a paragraph. That is maybe a skill that needs some nurturing or needs some mentoring for them to do successfully and to understand what information we're looking for. There's one part of the rubric where we even have as an example of like needing improvement is if the student just says, I love science, right? And we want something much more concrete and they may need some mentoring to get that.
Yeah, I found that, well, maybe this is your second question. Maybe I should wait because are you going to ask me about challenges?
Oh, yes. Not that we've staged our questions at all.
No,
But could you
we're just
maybe
simpatico.
speak to some of the challenges that you've experienced or the components that require a lot of support from you for your students to complete that maybe you wouldn't
Yes.
expect?
Yeah, right. So, I mean, things well, I guess it depends, right? What is your experience with students? What have you come across? So for me, like last year, I think was the first year with this letter of statement of interest that students had to do. And so that was surprising to me because students really seemed very talented students, right? Like they wouldn't be applying for a USRA if they weren't showing a lot of aptitude, but they floundered. So it kind of went from, I've always loved science, I love science, to I want to work in this like medical environment. And so it was a matter of saying, okay, wait a minute, the thing that you might have used for your essay to get into a professional health program actually can't be redeployed in the context of the natural sciences and engineering research award applications. So it just that again that students just don't know and they are busy and they're trying to economize their time and energy. And they might have in the past, it might have been enough to say, I love science, I want to do science. Maybe that was okay in high school, but it's not the sort of focused thing. So again, it was not assuming anything about the students and not judging the students and just saying, give me a draft and then making comments and questions that would help get them thinking in a slightly more focused direction. Tell me why exactly, da 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 da. So that was a challenge. The research portal is not so much of a challenge anymore. That was another big one is students they'd just be overwhelmed with what is a research code, things like that. That's also always a challenge for me every year is going back and finding the list of codes and figuring it out. But I think it's that, the student lack of awareness just because they haven't done it before, being overly modest, some gaps in writing skills. I'm just looking at some of my notes to see what else there might be that is standing out. I mean, the other thing is time, right? So again, I would just emphasize, and I don't think I need to emphasize it too much because I think the people in this Zoom call know that the earlier you start, the stronger you have, a better chance you have of writing a really strong application. So not being rushed on that. But honestly, I mean, if students are really struggling, then that also gives you information about them. And I would never suggest, don't no longer apply with them, but just be aware that if you're starting to see challenges with your students, then that might be something that you want to put a pin in and then dig into when they start working for you in May.
Thanks so much, Julia. And you can also, like, if there are questions your students have, like related to eligibility, you can send them to me. You can encourage them to come to my in-person with pizza bribe session on how to identify your skills, or our virtual accessible Zoom one that lacks pizza. And my office is another resource that they can use as well. And I think that's part of the skills that really we're building with them, right? Is how do you actually work with a supervisor? How do you apply for something with someone rather than independently? And how do you take advantage of the resources on campus, whether that's my office or career services, to help them strengthen their application? So our final question is, do you have any other advice for faculty as we enter into this USRA holiday season?
I think it would be the meshing of the supervisor form with the student form. So again, the ability to work with a student and to work with them in advance as much as possible of the deadline is an opportunity not only to help the student to strengthen their application, but it's also that ability to know more about them for your part of the application. So something that's written authentically, I think we could all agree is a more compelling grant proposal. So when you know your student a bit better, when you know what their career goals are, when you've read their resume and you get a sense of who they are as a person, what they're working towards, and like you said, Mandy, their aptitude. You know, if you're proposing for them to do research that they have zero experience in, that might come across as less feasible in the application. But if you bridge that with a few words, right? Like if you're aware of that, and then you explain how this individual will be positioned for success by, let's say, June, then again, the whoever's adjudicating these will have confidence and read that as authentic and considered, right? Because I think everyone at the end of the day wants to know that the students are going to be in a good place and they're going to be doing meaningful research, and the supervisors are also going to be in a good place, and they're going to be positioned to have increased productivity in their lab and building a relationship with a trainee that might last, you know, who knows how many years, maybe into grad school. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Such great points. And I think we did wrestle even with the rubric. There were some points where we're trying to say in a fancier way, like we don't want the students to be washing bottles in the lab. We want them to be doing a real research project. And we want to make sure that it's, yeah, like you said, it's achievable, and how those two application forms match. I think you'll see in the rubric has a lot to do with the difference even between like an exceptional or an excellent scoring. Thank you so much for your guidance, Juliet. We have 10 minutes left if anyone on the call has questions. Oh, great question. Should an Indigenous student not apply to the regular USRA? So if the student does not want to self-identify as Indigenous or does not feel comfortable going through USASC's verification process for Indigenous identity, they are welcome to apply for the regular USRA. However, if at all possible, I would encourage Indigenous students to apply for the USRA for Indigenous student researchers, because then as long as they meet the eligibility criteria, they will receive that USRA. So those awards are not being adjudicated the same as the other awards. They're just being checked for eligibility criteria, and working with our colleagues in the OVPIE to confirm verification of Indigenous identity through USASC's new policy. Same with Black student researchers as well. And selfishly, there's such fantastic Black student researchers and Indigenous student researchers that opens up more of those limited 60 awards for other students as well. Yes, Asmahan?
All right, so I have a couple questions. For the departmental ranking, which is required this year, who forwards the forms to the department? Is it because in the past was us who would do this, but now if the student is responsible for the submission, who does the forwarding to the department?
So for this year, it will still be the faculty's department that ranks the students, just to make the process easier in terms of the faculty member knowing which students are applying in advance. I think this is probably an area we wanted to make as many improvements as we could for this year, but that for next year might need a bit more improving. But for
I'm not
this
sure how
year,
it's done. Do I forward the names or
yeah,
ahead of
so
time? When?
yeah, so each department has a lot of flexibility in how they do this. In
I
the
see.
past, departments would have had to submit an alphabetized list of their student applicants. And so our sort of working group's assumption was that faculty members would let their, whether it's their department head or their undergrad chair, know which students they are applying with. And then we wanted to give a lot of flexibility for departments to determine how they rank the students. So there is the potential for your department to just say, hey, Mandy, we want you to just, you have the information, you can just rank them according to who has the highest GPA. But our working group was hopeful that some departments would want to sort of take a bit more consideration, especially around things like if you have a second year student and a fourth year student with a similar GPA, who do you rank higher? How do you consider ties? Does your department prefer to say we have 3 students with the same GPA, we rank them the same? Or are there things that your department knows about your students that could just give our adjudicators that extra information? I think it will also be helpful for our adjudicators when they receive their packages to, if they have a student with, an 87, to be able to say, hey, the student is actually the highest ranked in their department, when some of the other students that they're evaluating may all have grades in the 90s. And so that context from the departments, I think, will be really helpful. And we really did want the departments to have the flexibility and the option to determine how they, as a department, define academic performance. However, recognizing that with the tight timelines, or if there are departments or colleges where most of the students are, for instance, from a different department, that a department could also choose to just have me rank them by GPA alone, if that's easier. Julia?
Thanks. So just building on Asmahan's question and then Wendy's question in the chat. So do you have a hotline to all of the department administrators? Is there a check and balance system to make sure that there is somebody in each department who will be checking in regardless of faculty affiliation?
Yeah, so we have emailed sort of our general call with information about this new requirement to every department, to the listserv for all departments. And I've also been offering to departments that if they submit their list and then when I'm going through students, I see that someone has been missed, I will reach out to that department to make sure that they have an opportunity to rank that student, just knowing that, sometimes things get lost when we're doing things quickly and concurrently.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks.
And of course, too, if a college or department only has one application going forward, they do not have to rank their one student. But if they would like to provide some context or information for the adjudication committee, they are welcome to do so. And I'll also reach out to departments in January. Again, I just want to make sure that we haven't missed anything in the chaos of launching this in December. Sorry, Heather, you had your hand up and then I just kept on talking.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. I'm new-ish here, and I'm just wondering how many total applications you received for the 60 spots in general.
Oh, that's a great question. So last year, I think we received 164 applications total, but that included 4 applications for Indigenous student USRAs and 3 applications for Black student USRAs last year. Yes, Asmahan?
Sorry, it's me again.
No, don't apologize.
I got a bit confused because the 70% GPA is a requirement, right? Is an eligibility requirement.
From
and then you
NSERC.
mentioned something like if somebody's close to that, but not exactly, they can climb somehow,
Yes.
depending on their path. So how is it then a requirement and then you
and that's the language from NSERC. So NSERC has that an eligibility requirement is B-, but they also have throughout their documentation and the information that I am provided with an emphasis that they will not deny students based on grades alone. And they want us as institutions, even though we can come up with our own process, they really want us to consider improvement over time and other indicators of academic success. So where I found that challenging is historically our university and most of the other universities I've talked to evaluate academic performance just based on grades. It takes more time and effort to build in, okay, so the student's cumulative GPA is maybe not quite 70, but if we look at the last 2 years, it's showing that significant improvement and it's over 70. So NSERC has indicated an openness to if there's improvement and or if the institution writes sort of an additional letter of support for the student, that we can put forward students who don't have that cumulative GPA of 70 and or whatever we as a university define as a B-, and that they want us to be more open to how we assess academic excellence than just looking at grades. I think with the competitive awards, realistically, students need to have over 70 in those competitions. But we have tried to build out the rubric so that could be showing that improvement, right? Understanding that students can have a rough first year and they can still be fantastic academic performing students, and we don't want them to be unfairly penalized, especially given the circumstances of the last few years with the pandemic and what learning has been like. And then for our awards where we have unlimited, again, if the student isn't quite at that 70, but there's that professor who has confidence in them and we can explain maybe why the performance isn't quite at a 70, but has that upwards trend and other indicators, we can still put them forward to NSERC. And my understanding is that NSERC does not want to be denying applications just based on a grade, but they still include it in their eligibility. Any other questions? Alrighty, so it is right at 2 o'clock, so I'm going to first thank Julia so much for joining me today, and thank all of you for joining our call. And I'm going to turn off our recording, but you're welcome to stay and chat and ask questions. If there's anything else I can assist you with to make this process as easy as possible for yourself and your students. I'm going to be taking some holidays, but come January 3rd, I'll be back in the office. And if you would like me to come in for part of your department meeting or give a presentation for your students, I'm happy to do so to explain the changes for this year and make sure we get all of our information out.